best. If you're given a circle like this, and you have that kind of unit circle piece, and you have an angle like such. So far, as we've looked at the terminal points, we've called that the x value, that the y value, and that the radius value, correct? So given an angle theta, an angle of rotation, we've been able to find terminal points x, y, and then obviously we have a radius, which for the unit circle is 1. So what's the sine value? What's the sine of theta? It's defined to be the y value divided by the radius. So it's actually spelled S-I-N-E. Please don't say sin. We're not talking about sin. Okay, we're talking about the sine function. The cosine function happens to be x divided by r. We spell that C-O-S-I-N-E. Sometimes people look at it and they think it's silly to say cosine. They say cos. Mr. Gens, what's the cos? No, say cosine. Yeah, don't say cos. Say cosine. You sound much more intelligent when you say cosine. Sometimes people do say tan. We get it. Tangent. This is spelled T-A-N-G-E-N-T. Tangent. And that happens to be the y value divided by the x value. Now, what's interesting about these ratios, and you might wonder why are they what they are? Well, that's what they are by definition. It's like, why is a tiger, something that roams around that has a tail and is, striped and stuff like that? Well, that's what we call the tiger, right? Well, these are what we call sine, cosine, and tangent, and we can make great use of them. Something that's very helpful is in the unit circle. What is the radius in the unit circle, folks? 1. So if we're in the unit circle, then sine just ends up being y, because y divided by 1 is y. And cosine ends up being x. And tangent is still y divided by x. Which, if you notice now, y is simply the sine value, and cosine is the x value, so tangent is also sine of theta divided by cosine of theta. We have these other trigonometric functions as well. Once you know these three, the rest are easy. You just got to try to remember what they say. This is cosecant. Cosecant is paired kind of with sine. It's the reciprocal of sine. So it's r over y. And then you have secant of theta, which is going to be r over x. It's the reciprocal of cosine. And then you have cotangent of theta, which is the reciprocal of tangent, which is x over y. Or in other words, cosine of theta over sine of theta. Yes, no? Good. All right, so let's try an example here so you can understand what our goal is today. The rest is easy. We're going to determine the sine of pi over 3. The sine of pi over 3. I start by making an angle. Pi over 3 is how many degrees? 60. Hopefully now you've had enough practice that you can determine the terminal point. 60-degree angle, who knows what the terminal point is? 1/2 of root of 3 over 2. I'll quick walk through how we did that. In the unit circle, what's the radius? So the shorter side of a 3069 will be half that, and we multiply by the root of 3. We'll pick up there. Okay, so we pick it up. The question was, what is the sine of pi over 3? We found the terminal point. Is everybody with me that the terminal point is 1/2 root of 3 over 2? So if the answer is, what's the sine of pi over 3? It's the y value. It's the root of 3 over 2. That's what you're learning today, to identify the values of the trig functions for a given angle. The next one, we're not going to do negative 5 pi over 3. We're going to do we'll do negative 7 pi over 6. Cosine of negative 7 pi over 6. Okay. Who can tell me the angle of negative 7 pi over 6? Negative 210. What quadrant will that place me in? Second quadrant. Everybody agree that that's my shape there? So I have a 30, 60, 90. Can somebody give me that coordinate? Negative root of 3 over 2, 1/2. So cosine is which value? The x value. So therefore the cosine of negative 7 pi over 6 is negative root of 3 divided by 2. For the last one, then we're going to do 4 problems on your worksheet with you to help you get started. Tangent 7 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4 is how many degrees? 315. Which quadrant is that? Fourth. What kind of special triangle is made? 45, 45, 90. So now that coordinate is root of 2 over 2, negative root of 2 over 2. How do I determine tangent? And if I divide these, I would get negative 1. Earlier, we talked about tangent. We said it's y over x, or rise over run. What else is rise over run? Slope. The tangent of an angle is simply also the slope of the line. If you notice this 45-degree angle right there has a slope of negative 1. As you look at your worksheet, let's do problem number 5 together. We want to be able to determine sine of 2 pi over 3, cosine of 2 pi over 3, and tangent of 2 pi over 3. 2 pi over 3 is how many degrees? 120. So what is that terminal point that sits right there? You can see why we want to be able to determine these terminal points rather quickly. Sine is which value? The y value. Cosine is which value? The x value. How do I determine tangent? I take y and divide it by x. Root of 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. How do I divide that? Multiply by the reciprocal, so times negative 2 over 1. Will the result be positive or negative? Be negative. They cancel, and I get the root of 3. No, that's for parallel and perpendicular lines. I'm sorry, not for parallel. Parallel are saying perpendicular lines, opposite reciprocal. Flip it. Try number 10. 5 pi over 4 is how many degrees? 225. What special triangle is formed? A 45, 45, 90. So what's your terminal point? So what's the sine value? Negative root of 2 over 2. Cosine? Negative root of 2 over 2. Tangent, how do I determine tangent? Divide them and I get 1. Number 12, 3 pi over 2. What's the degree? 270. What's the terminal point? 0, negative 1. What would sine be? Negative 1. Cosine? 0. Tangent? Undefined. Last one, number 13. 5 pi over 3, how many degrees? 300. What kind of special triangle does that make? 30, 60, 90. What's the terminal point? Uh-oh, they're not asking for sine, cosine, and tangent. We're asking for secant, cosecant, and tangent. Secant is the reciprocal of what? Cosine. Cosine is the x value, correct? So secant is going to be the reciprocal of the x value. 2. Cosecant is the reciprocal of what? Sine. Sine is the y value. What's the reciprocal of negative root of 3 over 2? Right, negative 2 over the root of 3, when you multiply top and bottom, you get negative 2 roots of 3 over 3. How do you determine tangent? Y divided by x. Negative root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. Multiplied by the reciprocal, negative root of 3. I wish I could trade places with you sometime and see where you're sitting and the things that you're viewing. I just want to encourage you. I remember sitting in trigonometry. For me, it was really the first time that I felt like math was super interesting. Like I had questions and I saw some connectivity. Try to make sure when you look at the trig, see all the connections that exist. There's patterns that are existing, folks, over and over and over again. Try to find them, and it'll become easier, and you'll remember it better. There's patterns that exist here. The rest of the time is yours.